Well, I want to say it's so good to be here tonight. But I've said that in grief groups, I've said that at child loss retreat centers, and almost immediately, I regret the words that come out of your mouth. Because the only reason I'm here is because I have a dead son. And that sucks. But I have come to a point in my healing where I can genuinely grateful to be here because I found that a lot of the people, most people that I have met who have lost a child, end up being some of the most brave and strong and just beautiful souls that I can meet. And so while I can feel a little funny in saying it's great to be here because I know what brought myself and many of you here tonight, I know what brought us here is sad. I know that what we are doing here now is important. And I am just really, really grateful to see so many faces here tonight in support of both and in support of lost moms. So I am happy to be here tonight. So as Michaela said, I am the author of the Ansel Diary. But before I get into the context of the book, what's the word? Content. There we go. Before I get into that, I do want to share just a little thing that kind of explains why I wrote the book to begin with. At my wedding, our pastor chose the verse, Luke 12:48, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but the verse was, "To whom much is given, much is required." And at the time, I was very young, and I thought, yeah, I like that. That's nice. You know, it felt like, kind of like we were role models, and we need to take that seriously, right? We have a lot going for us, and yeah, I suppose that makes sense. We should be responsible with what we've been given. But as years and wisdom have grown, I have realized that it is not so much a verse that says, you guys are role models, have fun with that. It's actually kind of a sobering directive, right? If I have been given much, much is required. And that would come with some faith growing opportunities. I know that we're not all operating with the same faith, but faith is a very big part of my story, and so that has to be something that I talk about, because without my faith, I would never have been able to survive the loss of my son. And so before I come to the story of losing Ansel and how I was able to move forward in that season and end up writing a book about it, I need to build the context for this by going way back once again to college when I was sorry, I am not something going on. Back in college, I was dating my boyfriend Jim, and he and I had been together for a while, and I really loved him. I wanted to marry him, and I not only wanted to marry him, I had been praying and felt very strongly that we were supposed to get married that year. It wasn't just a dreamy wish, it was something that I felt deeply in my heart this was the right thing to do. We looked at rings, we talked, we made plans, we started talking about who would our groomsmen be, who would our bridesmaids be, and then as it got more and more serious, he said, "I don't think we're ready." And that really destroyed me. I wanted to marry him, yes. I loved him. I wanted to be married. We were young. I was very excited about the idea of forever. But it was way more than that. Because, like I said, I felt from the bottom of my heart that this was God's plan. The thing that was supposed to happen. The right thing that was supposed to happen. And it shattered my faith in my faith. Not so much in God, but in, wait, if I was so sure about this, then why does my reality not match it? I could not reconcile those two realities. That I knew in my heart that this was the right thing, and I had been in communication with God, like, he was talking about this. This was what was supposed to happen. And then it didn't happen. I spent the next year asking God, why? Why did you let this happen? I was depressed. There's my mom, she's here with me tonight. We were on a family trip. We were in Florida. It was sunny. I think we even went to Disney World, and she came up to me. I was just sad, low, and she came up to me on the beach, and she said, Haddi, I think it's time for medication. And she is not that kind of, she had never said that to me in my life, ever before. And she was right. It had taken a severe toll on my mental health because I could not make peace with that. Well, a year passed, and I got the ring. And I felt so stupid. I was happy. And the depression left. I felt, that my problem was solved, more or less. But I felt just immediately like I'd wasted so much time asking why. And in that time, so much damage had been done to my faith that I didn't really know what to do next. And I had this kind of numbness in my heart toward God and toward my faith. And that remained. It remained for probably about 7 years where I just felt really, really numb and apathetic. Well, we had 2 children, and we had a house, we had a dog, our marriage was doing well, we had a lot of really great things going for us, and I realized I didn't need God anymore. And what I mean by that is I prayed. I still went to church. I was a leader in ministry in our local community. But I didn't need to rely on God. Our life was easy. Our life was nice. And I just didn't know what good was a faith in God if I wasn't relying on Him. So I did what any person would do. And we got a foster care license. I wanted to get back to that faith where it really mattered to me. I wanted to rely on God. I wanted to have to trust Him and count on Him to make decisions in my life. So we did get our license for foster care. We knew we wanted to have one more child at least, but we were open to adoption, open to having another biologically. We weren't really sure. And so to make a long story short, when I was 3 months pregnant with my 3rd child, we took in a 2-day-old infant. She stayed with us for about 6 months, and she was just precious. It was such a wonderful time in our family, and in the end, she was able to be placed back with her biological father, making a happy ending for everybody. But during that time, I was very largely pregnant, taking care of 3 children, had a very obnoxious dog in the house, and our house was starting to feel really, really cozy. I was feeling that itch, like I wanted to move, but that was something that my husband and I had not spoken about at all. He was operating under the understanding that we were already in our forever home. So he told me one day that he wanted to put a chunk of our savings into an investment. And I said, I'm like 8 months pregnant. That's just huge. The dog is in my way. It's just, I'm just about to lose my mind. And I said very calmly, I said, okay, I understand why you want to do that, but I just have to say this before we move forward. It does make me disappointed that it means we're that much further from moving into a bigger house. To make another long story short, we put an offer in a new house that night. My brother-in-law happens to be a realtor. He got us into this house that my mother had found as a foreclosure, and it was just like, let's just see what this is all about. It ended up feeling, as I walked through, like this is an answer to prayer. Once again, I walked through, and I was never a girl who dreamed of my dream wedding, but I did dream of my dream house. And so as I walked from room to room, my husband and I just kept locking eyes like, this is insane. Like, is this really real? Like, is this really a possibility? I do have to give you a disclaimer, it was a foreclosure. The decor was awful. The carpets were stained. The windows had mold. Like, there were a lot of things wrong with the house. But he and I saw so much potential in this. And so as we walked through and put in this offer, we just felt like this was right. And so we put the offer was accepted, and, our foster baby went to go with their dad. I gave birth to my third child. We, were packing up our old house. We had about a month and a half in between when we put in the offer and when closing was, so it was just a very busy time. Well, the day before closing, the title company called. The title company was supposed to make sure that the house title is clean, and they had a month and a half to do so. The day before, they called and said that there was a massive tax lien against the house. Closing was canceled. So I go immediately to worst case scenario, we're not getting the house. And I immediately remembered my engagement season. And I went, I don't want to waste my time this time. They didn't say it's done. They just said, we need to resolve this issue. It could take up to 45 days. But they had already ruined our trust in them and their ability to actually get this done. And so it was very easy for me to see that this could result in not getting the house. And so I remembered my engagement season. I remembered I did not want to waste my time with asking why this was happening. I did not want to waste my time and say, this is not fair. This wasn't supposed to happen. And so I focused my prayers on saying, God, whatever it is that you want for our family, that's what I want. So please help me to be at peace. Thanks. Well, this went on for about 2 weeks. Me just trying to ask God to help me be at peace, be at peace. Whatever happens, help me be at peace. And in the middle of those prayers, I had this little voice enter into my heart that said, if you get a call for a girl tomorrow, say yes. We had not gotten any phone calls about taking a foster care placement since we had had our other little girl. Our third baby was about 2 months at the time. And I decided, you know what, I'm just looking for meaning, right? Because this feels like a really meaningless season. I don't understand what's going on. Okay, whatever. I don't, maybe that's just me making this up. I'm not sure. The next day at 11 a.m., who should call but the county, saying we have a 3-day-old baby girl who needs a placement today. I said yes, because I was told to say yes the day before. And so we said yes. And in foster care, if a child is considered an emergency placement, it means it's urgent. They need a placement right now, as soon as you can, and very often what happens is when the child is with you, the foster placement that said yes in an emergency, they find a family member. And so often these placements only last a couple of days, sometimes even a couple of hours. There were even a few times that we said yes on the phone, and within 10 minutes, the county called back and said, they're going to stay with the family member. Thanks for your willingness, but they're going to stay. So we said yes, fully expecting this to last hardly any time at all. So my husband took night shift with her, while I took night shift with our 2-month-old, and we just said, we're just going to do this. We're just going to see where this goes. Well, that afternoon, who should call but the title company telling us we can close next week. And that was a complete shock, and it made me go, what are we doing? So she came to stay with us, and we had to pack the rest of our boxes. We had to get ready for this big move, all the while taking care of 2 tiny babies and kind of scratching her head, eyes wide, going, what is happening? Well, what ended up happening was our family, our moving, everything just got too complicated because, again, in foster care, yourself and your family, you need to get licensed, make sure the family is safe, but you also need your dwelling to be licensed. And so there's fire escape routes and fire extinguishers to make sure the temperature of the water doesn't get too hot. So we just got too complicated, and they had to take her and help her move to a different home, a different place then. Once again, I'm just going, What was that all about? I don't even understand why that happened. I don't know why we were supposed to say yes, but I know that I heard that. And I just kind of walked away from that season going, maybe my faith just needed to be tested. Maybe something would be coming where I just needed this training to prepare for. That would be, as a side note, here's a fun side note. The house we moved into, we moved in 1 month before the pandemic shut everything down. That was just added to the craziness of that season. Well, before I was pregnant with Ansel, and I need to back up here because not everyone knows my story. I have my 3 children, dear Thorn and Thorn. They're alive here with me today. Ansel is my 4th son, my 4th child. And he was a complete shock to our family. He was not unwanted, but he was not accepted. In fact, I'm a firstborn daughter. I like my plans. I like to look at pro-con lists. I like to be in control of my decisions. All 3 of our children have been planned, but there was a part of me that just thought, I'd really like to have another child, but I really don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to make that decision. I've had chronic migraines since I was very young, 4 or 5 years old. And in that time, I've had to significantly alter a lot of plans in my life. And so having a 4th child felt on some level irresponsible. But I wanted one. I wanted another baby. My husband and I both got our degrees in education. I've been married since I was 12. We're very familiar and comfortable with the idea of a big family. But I didn't want to make that decision and then later say, you shouldn't have done that, Haddi. And so he wasn't surprised, and he was a very welcome surprise. Briefly, before I was pregnant with him, I was struggling for the first time in my life to really, I was struggling with the faith of whether God was actually real. Faith is long, it's always been a part of my life, but I never questioned whether God was real, or, what he was really doing with my life. But with everything going on in the world, with the pandemic and political rhetoric and with all of the fighting and all of these things, I just found myself going, these people say they believe in the same God that I believe in, but we are taking such different conclusions that is God even real? Could he even be real? And so I really just struggled. And fortunately, it was only a week of me really kind of having an identity crisis, going, I'm not sure that God is even existing. But at church, I listened to sermons, and it was why do bad things happen to good people. And I went in with a migraine, and migraines had really affected like 80% of my life. At that point, I couldn't say yes to most things. I had to say yes with a disclaimer that I could do this as long as I don't have a migraine that day. And 80% of my days were either treating pain or trying to prevent the pain or just recovering on very painful days. It was a very dark time. So at church, when the pastor said we're going to talk about why do bad things happen to good people, I kind of stopped. Because I was like, I've heard every message about this, so you're not going to tell me anything new. But sitting there, it really felt like God kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, you see, Haddi, I am still hanging there. What I didn't know, Ansel was probably conceived within that. I wouldn't know that until several weeks later when I can take my positive pregnancy test, and that's a whole story itself. But that message, I am real, just hang in there. That is what sustained me through the hardest pregnancy that I had. I had morning sickness well into 23 weeks. I had severe migraines. I had to go to the ER for one that lasted 5 days and wasn't going anywhere. It was during the pandemic, so I did get the vaccine, and that was kind of scary. That was a very difficult decision to make. I was taking a lot of medication for my migraines just to survive. Because I had 3 other children that I was taking care of. And all of those things, it felt really scary. It felt really, really difficult. But I felt sustained by that promise that God was real, and I just had to hang in there. Ansel was an answer to prayer. I wanted that fourth baby, and I didn't want him to make a decision. And I have a girl, boy, boy, boy. And my first 2 boys, my girl, I had her name picked out when I was in kindergarten. My boys, I was in the hospital going, I think this is what his name's going to be. Boys have just been hard for me. So Ansel, I got his name 2 months before his due date, which was crazy for me. But I just told you everything that had happened to me medically that made me a little worried, but I knew that I had to make those decisions. And Ansel knew with divine protection. So when I went to the midwife and there was no heartbeat, I was furious. I was so shocked because this was a child that had been a literal answer to prayer. The name was with divine protection, and he was gone. When I went in, he was already gone. So we went into the hospital. I had to take the medication to be induced, and I went in on a Wednesday, waited all day on Thursday, and he was born Friday, 5:30 a.m. And we were fortunate in our story to see with clarity that he passed away from a knot in the umbilical cord. The reason I say unfortunate in that is because there are a lot of unanswered stillbirths. There are a lot of mothers who lose their children. There is no clear reason. And there can be a lot of confusing feelings of guilt, shame, and just regret, and just wondering if I had done this differently, if I had done that differently. And so for that, I do say that I'm fortunate that I could see with my own eyes the problem being those cord, and I could say, at least it wasn't X, Y, Z. So the day of waiting, I was in the hospital. And again, I had not felt any direction, just hang in there. And as I was sitting in the hospital, I felt another message come that just said, this is important. Pay attention. Get present. And I just remember looking around the hospital room, just feeling the significance of that moment in my life. Now, I have been screaming at God on the drive home from the midwife, just saying, are you kidding me? Are you, like, this is the child you gave to me as an answer to prayer, and he's dead? I couldn't even understand that. And I said to him, because God knows what you're thinking, prayers should just be honest conversation. That's what I believe. And I just said, if you want me to have anything to do with you again, you're going to have to drag me through this, because I have no interest in seeking you out, because this does not make any sense. Had some quiet time in the hospital. This is important. Pay attention. Get present. And again, I remembered my anxiety season and then the house season. And I knew I could not spend my time asking why this happened. I needed to face it. And I needed to pay attention. And I needed to just let grief do what it had to do. This is my first real experience with grief. And it was scary. But I knew that if I approached it with honesty, and if I was if I wanted to make it through, I was going to have to be very deliberate in making sure that I faced the darkest feelings that would come over the next year. So, it kind of brings me to the phrase that a lot of lost moms hear. And it goes something like this: "You're so strong. I could never do what you do." And any lost mom I've talked to has said, what else are we supposed to do? I mean, it's the only reason the strength is perceived is because we're still here. When most, if not all of us, wish that we could have just been buried with our own child. But we didn't. And that strength is something that we don't feel strong. We don't feel strong. And I'm speaking for myself, but I would imagine Michaela might be able to relate, is that by kind of helping other lost moms, it's almost like helping them breathe through the darkest moment of their life helps us to breathe as well. That kind of strength comes at the cost of someone who is broken. I'm happy to be here to show support and to show love and to say, you're gonna make it, okay? You're gonna make it. But it comes at the cost of my own loss. And that has been my experience I've been to a grief group, I've been to grief share, I've been to a child loss retreat center. In all of these places, all of these organizations, the K.O.L.T Foundation, they have all been founded by the parents who have lost a child, people who have felt this pain for themselves. And so that's why I want to take a moment to just really, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of you who are in this room tonight who have not experienced that pain for yourself. To be seen and heard and believed and validated that our loss is real and worth supporting means more than you could possibly imagine. Because we are limping along, holding each other up, saying we're going to make it through. And when you can come alongside of us and say, you know what, I see that you're struggling, I don't know that struggle, but I want to help. That kind of strength is invaluable. And I genuinely just am so grateful for those of you who are here tonight for that reason. I recently had an experience with that kind of support back in the fall. I had an OBGYN doctor call me to ask, what can we do in our clinic to make it more supportive for lost moms? And so we talked about things like separate waiting rooms and about providing heartbeat teddy bears in the first trimester instead of second. And we had talked about color coding the chart. So the nurse doesn't come in and say, so how is the baby? We had a really, really fruitful conversation. And in that, he also decided to include my books, the Ansel Diary and the Blank Diary, as care packages for their patients who would lose their children in miscarriage and stillbirth. And so these care packages, I do want to mention, are so important. Now, Michaela had not made the K.O.L.T Foundation at that point. So I did not receive a K.O.L.T Foundation package, but I did receive a different care package in the hospital. And what I have come to understand, because I've met many lost moms in the last 3.5 years, that's not to be taken for granted. I have met a lot of women who came out of stillbirth or infant loss or miscarriage and said, no one was there for us. We didn't even get a care package. Nobody even said a word to us. And I've seen the profound difference that has made in receiving support versus not receiving support. In our care package, we received resources, we received blankets, and the blankets have been an amazing tool for my children to cope with the grief. They have their Ansel blankies and they carry them around. And it's been just a very, very special thing, and that's a tangible thing. So they don't get to hold their brother, but they get to hold a piece of him and keep him close to their heart. And so that's where my story, the Ansel Diary, comes into play. Because in those early moments, some of the only words that comforted me came from those who had already lost a child in stillbirth. It was something about knowing that I wasn't alone, something about knowing that I could survive this. And there was something about just having the knowledge that I wasn't alone. That was just very, very important. I have been a writer forever. I loved writing in elementary school. I loved blogging in college. Writing has just been kind of second nature to me. It's the way I feel I communicate best, and I have always wanted to be a writer. And so as I started processing what was happening with Ansel, I went straight to social media. I went to Facebook. I had already built a lot of supportive connections through there as we talked about our foster care journey, as I talked about my migraines. And so I started sharing about what was happening with Ansel, seeking prayers, asking for support. And as I continued to grapple with this loss, I continued to write on social media where mothers started reaching out to me, ones that I had no idea. They would reach out to me and they would say that they had lost baby too, and that I was saying things that they never felt they had permission to say out loud. And so I continued sharing until it started getting a little bit too hard for me to share publicly. But I continued to write privately because it was the one thing that helped me get all the ick from up here and to get it out of my body. As I continued writing the Ansel Diary, I started realizing that this could be a tool because I'm already comfortable sharing about foster care, about migraines, about my faith journey. And when I was younger, I had struggled with depression and an eating disorder. I was comfortable talking about all of those things, and so I thought, I think this could be a real tool. And so the Ansel Diary was born out of my necessity to heal. And it was published as a way to hopefully help inject just a little bit of hope for mothers who are experiencing the darkest moments of their life. And that darkness, I want to talk about, Michaela's hummingbird for K.O.L.T. I know that the hummingbird is such an important symbol of hope and light and reminds you of K.O.L.T. every time you see a hummingbird anywhere you go. And I think a lot of us mothers just have a symbol of light or something that reminds us of our babies that helps us to just feel the light of our child's presence. And so I want to share this story that I wrote in the Ansel Diary. It's not a story like you'll see. This is about sharing light with the world. So this is a few months after Ansel had passed. And this is from the Ansel Diary. One thing that will be precious to me always is knowing that Ansel made a difference in this world. My aunt sent me a photo of a beautiful lamppost that my uncle bought for her because she was feeling the heaviness of grief over Ansel, my Ansel. She never met him, and yet his life impacted her enough that she is sending more light into the world, literally. Sharing my story is one of my ways of sending light into the world. Mental health and clarity of mind have become one of the most important things in life to me. Things might get bad, but if I know that I am processing them as truth and walking away with only truth, then I can get stronger through it. That's a big reason I share the way that I do. If the things in our minds are left alone up there to stew and fester, they can turn into something ugly and dangerous, especially when our minds begin to tell us that they are the only ones who think the way that we do. My journey didn't start with the loss of Ansel, but losing him has stripped away my guard and self-doubt unlike anything else could have. I'm not grateful he died, but I do recognize that I was given a choice in how I am going to deal with his death. And I'm grateful that I chose to be staring into the face of this tragedy and saying, fine, you're here. But let's be clear, you're not going to ruin me forever. Hiding from my grief will not make it go away. It is now a part of me and my story from now on. Not to say that I don't take breaks from my grief. I do. It's possible. My crafting is the main way that I do that. There are a lot of reasons for this. A very simple one is that I don't care if I have a good enough reason anymore. A lot of these projects are things I wanted to do before Ansel died, but I didn't feel there was a purpose or end goal for them. I just wanted to make it. Now I have decided if I feel like making something, I should do it. No great reason is needed other than getting what's in my mind out. So that creativity of mine has persisted. Something about grief, breaking down the walls in my heart, has made me, in a lot of ways, a different person. And for those things, I am grateful. It is my way of putting life into the world. If you visit me at my table, you'll see I am trying down those books crazy. It was something that I long dreamed of doing, is putting books into the world. And the Ansel Diary was the first that I did. And I have since taught myself to do digital art, which has been very freeing, something that has helped me to continue to heal and put light into the world. I see Michaela putting on this gala. I see the board members helping with this, and this is just a beautiful way. And looking at the candles, looking at the tea lights, and I'm just seeing light. The sparkles, it's just almost midnight, putting light into the world, and that is so, so important. So, I do want to end with just a note that we are here tonight raising money for the Cuddle. I'm from the Twin Cities. I was in a hospital that had one of these. And I can say I kind of took it for granted. So when I found out that there were hospitals that didn't have this, it kind of broke my heart. Because I delivered during pandemic regulation. We were not supposed to have visitors. Our nurses were very gracious and did allow our parents and my sisters to come. And because of the Cuddle Cot, and because we were able to keep Ansel in a better condition, my family was able to come and hold him. They were able to say goodbye. And we got as much time as we wanted with him before we made the decision. We were ready. This is the front line of stillbirth support. This is the very first thing that will affect the outcome of grief for moms who lose their babies. It cannot be overstated how important those moments are. As Michaela said, those photos are the only photos you have. I have photos of Ansel, they're the only photos I have and will ever have. Having that time is a gift that cannot be replaced. And the Cuddle Cot is not just a medical tool, it is the gift of time. And so I am so grateful, again, for everyone's support, everyone here tonight. I also want to mention that Michaela and I, we met through mutual friends. The Ansel Diary is included in several of the care packages. And if you are wanting to make donations to these care packages, I do have a QR code that leads directly to the K.O.L.T Foundation wish list. So you can make direct donations that will be sent directly to them. And that also includes the blank diary. Since I wrote the Ansel Diary, I wanted this to be fill in the blank for anyone else who lost a child or another once they lost. So I'm going to take on you for a second. If I gave this to Michaela, she could write the K.O.L.T Diary. I've taken excerpts from the Ansel Diary to kind of share moments of vulnerability because I believe vulnerability is what will lead to healing. So I share moments of vulnerability and then ask a question. I'm not a grief therapist. I'm not an expert. but I do want to be your friend in grief. And I want to make the space safe so that you can talk about those that you love. So these are both available to be donated through the KO.L.T care package. And on that note, I do want to end with the blessing that I wrote at the end of the Ansel Diary. God, may your will be done in my life. When my circumstances have brought me to my knees, I ask that you meet me there and remind me of your presence. Renew my faith. When it feels that all hope is lost, I ask that you speak to my heart in a way that only you can. Remind me that you are good and that your goodness is a hope worth reaching for. When I am alone, whether in truth or in perception, I pray that you would fill me with your love. Remind me that you love me and help me to speak your love for those around me. Help me to live in a way that is abundant in love, and in this way may I find true peace and joy. Above all, Lord, be with me in the big and the small, in the good and the bad, in life and in death. Amen.
Just wanted to share a few things before we get the night going with Nathan and Alexandra. As you can see from our goal chart over there on